Hello everybody, hallo iedereen. Welcome to a new podcast, a Heart Song interview with Dr. Nicole LePera. I cannot tell you actually how excited I am to have you back on my show. So already thank you very much for being here again. Dr. Nicole LePera, she's a leading voice in about the healing work. She's a New York Times bestselling author of How to Do the Work, How to Be the Love You Seek, How to Meet Yourself. That's a workbook. And all of these books and all of her work help the people to take the power of healing back into their own hands. She literally inspires millions of people around the globe. And also with your self-healers circle, this is exactly what you do. You help people to take that power back to where it actually belongs, into our own hands. Yeah. And so thanks a lot for being here again, Dr. Nicole LePera. How are you?
I am so good, Jasper. Thank you for having me. I'm honored to be back. And thank you for that very beautiful introduction.
Yeah, well, for me, it's really special that you wanted to come back again and to talk about your new book, Reparenting the Inner Child, the new science of our old wounds and how to heal them. And I just love it. I think, I don't think there's another topic we should be talking about in this time, huh? And I don't think there's anyone who doesn't need it. So let's start with the basics. What is the inner child?
Yeah, I think, and thank you for your very beautiful kind of illustration of, I think
Mm,
the mysteries of the human experience. And I think a
yeah.
lot of us are seeking, right, to understand who are we, what is our purpose, and this is where this book really was kind of grown out of, was the universal curiosity, desire, and awareness. I think that a lot of us have that we're not necessarily operating, we're not being who we really are. And so for me, I started to gain that awareness back when I was in private practice, where I would have very wise, insightful individuals who would come in, and to some extent, we would be able to acknowledge the patterns that were causing their suffering, though we could never seem to build that bridge from insight into actual action. So for me, it was a really disempowered place where the conversation about inner child began. And then I came to understand the definition that I can provide right now, which is the reason why a lot of us are stuck. We don't know who we are. We're repeating patterns that don't serve us. Some of them are passed through generations, right, in the form of these dysfunctional cycles. A lot of us pride ourselves on being cycle breakers now, though the reason why we struggle to create change lives in the concept of the inner child. Because simply speaking, what that is, it's a part of us that is in all of us that learned very early on in life based on our earliest environments, our earliest relationships. And this is a part that specifically learned how to do foundational things like handle unpredictability, handle conflict, handle unmet needs, navigate our emotions, and really simply learn and become who we are. And that part, it doesn't matter how old we are, right? How many years we've gained since childhood. It doesn't matter how much we may have changed geographical locations. We're living on the other side of the world than our childhood home is, and or how much our relationships have changed. The reality of it is we retain, or that inner child comes with us. It's the
Mhm.
habits and patterns that a lot of us, we meet in moments where we're inexplicably acting out of character. We're saying, we're doing things that we don't mean to do, and we feel badly later, or we're shutting down and we're disconnecting from the support around us. And or we become, right, this identity that some of us are so aware, right? I'm the overachiever, I'm the caretaker, right? I'm this person, but I don't really know who I am. Because
Yeah,
again, that inner child comes with us. We continue to repeat those patterns even as our circumstances have changed.
yeah, exactly. And does everyone, so everyone has an inner child, and an inner child, is it always like an unhealed part, or can it also be a joyful part?
We all have an inner child, and
Hmm.
it was again the part, the expression of us, the thoughts in our mind, the way we show up in our body, that really was kind of formed around one really simple question. And again, this was in childhood where we began to not necessarily consciously ask this question, but assess whether or not what happens, let me word it this way, when we reach for connection and
Yeah,
comfort,
yeah.
right? And so we're so attuned, we're taking in information. Sometimes it's direct information where we're we're shamed or our emotions are invalidated. And other times it's more indirect information, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where someone just shuts down and stops speaking to us. We get the silent treatment, or maybe we're on the other end of an explosive reaction. So, what happens to us when we reach comfort or connection, the more consistent the answer is. So, for instance, if care was consistently available, more or
Mm-hmm.
less when we needed it, right? If someone was able to show up to support us, what we then learned, not just in our mind, but in our body, we learned that closeness is safe, that
Yeah.
we can be who we are and still maintain connections around us. So that would be the example. Inner child still exists within that person,
Uh-huh.
right? Though it maybe doesn't come out in these moments of expression that become more problematic. Because if in childhood, to kind of counter that example, if we didn't have consistent care or support when we needed it, right? Instead of learning that closeness and comfort was available, what
Mm-hmm.
we have learned, right, was to do a million different things, from clinging to connection whenever it's available at any cost, taking any breadcrumb that is possible. Or maybe we're on the other side of that spectrum. We learned that connection was actually unsafe. Someone overwhelmed us with their emotions when we were close to them in childhood. So now instead of moving toward connection that we might know that we want or need, we're bracing because it doesn't feel safe, or we're pulling away entirely. So that would be a more of an example of an wounded inner child, so to speak. But to answer your question, we all have it. It just is a matter of the answer to that question. What happens when I reach for comfort or connection? And then that's when we start to see the habits, whether they were developed from security, a healthy inner child, so to speak, or from insecurity, right? A
Yeah.
wounded inner child.
Yeah, exactly. Wow. And let's say that someone has not heard yet of this inner child and is not really aware. How would you know that there's a strong, unhealed inner child part in you? How does it act out in our life? Like, what are the effects right now that we can have? I know there are numerous, and you speak, of course, you speak about it in your book, but what are these things that you can really clearly see? Okay, there's an unhealed part in me acting out.
Yeah, so I think the most common moments that we can become aware of this wounded inner child part are when we feel right overwhelmed by emotion, right?
Hmm.
Where we feel a sense of urgency, as if we feel compelled to act, to say, to do the thing, regardless of if there's a little voice in our head that's like, wait a minute, I don't know. Or we have that voice that comes out later that was like, that wasn't the thing that you should have done. But
Yeah.
those moments of, and I'm going to be very intentional with this, of felt urgency, where it
Hmm.
quite literally, right, feels like habits, patterns, our body, right? We feel like there's no other choice
Yeah, you
but
cannot
to
hold
do.
it, cannot contain it, like an eruption of energy.
Correct. Correct. So a lot of times what you'll hear, and the way you'll hear it described maybe online, is right. Oftentimes those moments result in what could feel, either by ourselves or maybe a very helpful observer, our reaction is bigger, right, than the moment itself, right? We are having a big emotional reaction to maybe to something that, even if a little time goes by on our own occasion, we don't feel right as strong about it once that reaction in our body has calmed down. So, in addition to the urgency in our body, the bigness, right, the disproportionate emotional response where it's not really matching objectively what is happening, a lot of times that will map onto into our mind, where we begin to notice all or nothing, black and white
Hmm.
catastrophe type thinking, where we're always thinking of the worst case scenario. So those are really great markers that might be a moment. And to be clear, this does not mean that the emotion, the reaction that you're experiencing is any less real. It is 100% a very real part of your experience, but it might be coming from a wounded older place, which is why in those moments where we are reacting from that disproportionate, emotion, they
Hmm.
do sometimes land as a bit developmentally immature, right? We're saying and doing, we're screaming and yelling, we're not speaking, right? We're doing things that a lot of us see children do because, in a way, I'm not to shame, I do it myself. We quite literally are brought back in time and reacting as the child who, at one time, that was all they could do, right? Scream or yell or leave, shut down, because that was all their circumstances allowed.
Yeah. Yeah, I find it so amazing how it just keeps repeating itself. Of course, you're right, and I want to talk about it with you, um, because it's so amazing that what you say doesn't matter where you are. If you are on the other side of the planet or with completely other people, it's still there, and it will keep on going. I find that so amazing because you don't want it because it gives so much suffering. And even when you start becoming conscious, which is already, of course, a big step of your own reacting and also the damage it gives, then it's so hard to to not step into it again, to let it go, to I am so amazed by this body, by this nervous system that it holds all this information. You don't even remember where it all comes from. What you said can be my grandmother who had suppressed anger or whatever. But it's all stored here. One question is, why would the body, which is so intelligent, repeat the harm? Why would it repeat it? And the other question is, how do we meet it in a way that it can start transforming?
That's a really, really great question. I want to go back to kind of some wisdom that you were acknowledging a bit earlier. I think it was John Kabat-Zinn, one of his very famous books. He's an expert in mindfulness-based practices, but his book is entitled "Wherever You Go, There You Are." Right? And it's
Mm.
beautifully describing what you're very wisely also describing, which is, and it's not to say that a lot of us, myself included, don't try desperately to outrun ourselves, right? If I just
Yeah.
move, if I just leave the relationship, right,
Did
something
you
will
write it
change.
somewhere that when you feel the urge to really, you want to leave everything and move to another side of the world, this is like there's some attachment problem or
Yes.
something. Eh?
Right.
You wrote it, yeah,
I
or
have
said it.
gotten there myself. I have fantasized. I have not taken the action, right, to uproot my life in those ways. Though I have historically done that in relationship.
Ah, yeah.
I would inevitably get to the end of or get to the part in a relationship where I would feel the lack of emotional connection. I up until about a decade ago when I understood my patterns a bit more deeply, I would inevitably prior to that time blame the partner that I was in the relationship with. You're not meeting my emotional needs, thinking, right, if I leave this environment, this relationship, I'll find the person who just gets me, who I just feel that sense
Yeah.
of close with, right? And I've come to the end of that. I discovered that it didn't matter who I picked, where I picked the person, where the relationship, right, existed, the patterns still came with me. And why is that? To answer your question, then, it does seem illogical on the surface, right? Why would this intelligent body repeat things that are objectively, right? For me, why would I keep entering a relationship but keeping the person at arm's length away and then holding them responsible for the lack of connection that I have created? That's causing my own suffering. So why am I doing it? And again, the answer lives in childhood. Back to that question, right? When I reach for comfort and connection, what happens? That question is so deeply important because it's not just a hypothetical question in childhood, it's a matter of life and death. Because as a human infant, we cannot exist, we cannot live, we cannot care for ourselves physically, and now we understand, verified by science, our nervous system can't settle on its own. So we need someone else to show up in service of our care, right? To feed us, to make sure that we're sleeping, to comfort us when our body is dysregulated. So, what we learn, right, and the way we adapt to how that question is answered in childhood becomes, in many ways, to simplify it, we can think about it as a lifeline.
Yeah,
Even
yeah.
if we've had to modify ourselves, push down certain emotions, right, show up as a pleaser or an appeaser to avoid perhaps a explosive reaction from mom or dad or whomever it was, the the adaptation that was in childhood was life maintaining, right? Because even though I'm not fully being me, and that's of course going to accumulate problems over time, I'm showing up as I need to ensure that this person, to the best of their limitations and abilities, right, shows up in care of me. And then according to our nervous system, which is very intelligent but can be very black and white, it will prefer the familiar and the predictable to the unfamiliar in any moment because it, simply speaking, is predictable,
Yeah.
right? The uncertainty of not knowing what happens next feels far too threatening to our human body, to our physiological and emotional survival. So that is why, to answer your question, we will pick even a habit that creates, for some of us, a lifetime of suffering that we're well aware of, our body in moments, right, where we're still reaching for that habit, even though the voice is in our head saying, why are you doing this? Even though maybe our very well-meaning loved ones and friends are saying, why are you doing that? Because in those moments, our body feels a sense of comfort and safety simply because it's familiar, not because it's logically healthy for us.
Isn't that amazing? Wow, it's so well and clearly explained. And when you speak, it's really these neural pathways, of course, that you speak about, and that's also the
Yes.
part we can speak to rewire these new pathways, which is of course a miracle. But it's the same thing actually. Yeah, so it's really like a pathway. But I find it so amazing that this, yeah, that the choice would be suffering above pleasure or joy only because it's safe or known territory.
I want to also complicate and maybe add some more interest into this conversation because
Yeah.
all of this learning, I was just obviously describing it, locating it in our own childhood, right? Because that served us the way we had to adapt, right? How we had to show up to ensure comfort and connection to whatever degree it was available. I was first describing it contained, so to speak, in our own childhood, our ages, our homes, our geographical
Hmm.
location, our relationships. To add complication and perhaps fascination to this whole conversation, that's not where it begins.
Yeah.
It actually begins, and I'm jumping off of this because it's something you're wisely bringing up, Jasper, which it begins, and you mentioned this earlier, in past generations,
That's
right?
right.
These adaptations, and this is why cycles are passed through generations.
Hmm.
And again, just simplifying it, thinking about it logically, wouldn't it make complete sense, right? That if, say, our ancestors, our grandmom, our grandpop, great grandparents, even, right? If, say, their environment, say there was a food shortage, and I talk about this, there's a very fascinating study that kind of puts numbers to what I'm going to describe here. Say there's food shortage or some other kind of like lack in their childhood, right, experience.
Hmm.
It would make complete sense. So what happens is we have a crazily intelligent body, like we're both acknowledging, a body that is living in food shortage, and again, I'm going to simplify science here just for the point, will undergo certain amount of changes, right? It'll hold on to energy, it'll store fat, it'll do things so that it can ensure survival when calories are either scarce, unpredictable, or absent.
Hmm.
So that's a beautiful adaptation of how a human body deals with the stress of, say, nutritional insecurity so that that person can, survive to the best of their ability. So wouldn't it make then complete sense in the kind of evolution physiology perspective of things that assuming that that individual chooses to procreate and has a future generation, right? Before airplanes existed, before travel, right? More often than not, ancestors grew up in the same village or around the same location that their parent did. So wouldn't that be a beautiful thing to pass down to future generations, assuming that if food insecurity happened now, why might it not happen again? So
Hmm.
right now, this little human is built kind of with the hardware to make them even more resilient, assuming that circumstances stay more or less the same, which would increase their chances to survive the next time there's food insecurity or a nutritional or a famine. And that's what they found in this very fascinating study called the Dutch hunger experiment, where they were able to map those changes not only to the mothers that were pregnant at the time of a famine, but they saw in their future children that they then had and gave birth to similar changes in their body's ability, right, to hold on to fat, to store, to essentially prepare for a
Wow.
famine.
Yeah.
So this is why, and what has happened for a lot of us, things that have happened to our ancestors that have caused stress have resulted in beautifully wise adaptations to our kind of lineage, so to speak, right? Epigenetically passed on, not wired into our genetics, meaning unchangeable, but impacted by environmental choice. So just to
Yeah.
add a hopeful end to this story and to perhaps what I'm sharing now, even the many of us, if not all of us, who have, right, we're holding on to all of these older adaptations because they did once serve, whether it was us in childhood, whether it was our ancestors, great, great, great grandparents somewhere, in our past. What also can change is as we show up differently. And they found this in the study. Those children, right, whose bodies adapted to famine when they were, when they had nutrients available, when they were in supportive relationships, all of those changes actually epigenetically reverse themselves. So simply speaking,
Mm-hmm.
everyone who's a cycle breaker, who becomes aware, not just knowing the things and the patterns that aren't serving them, who changes them, right, through choices, body, nervous system regulation, lifestyle habits that can create safety and security,
Uh-huh.
right? The changes that now will be gifted to future generations, should you choose to have them, are going to be literally new instructions for their DNA. But I think that's fascinating because right now it makes sense for a lot of us why we wake up and we're like, well, I'm stuck like this because this is how my family is, right? We've all repeated these patterns across lifetime. So who am I and how could I possibly change? And so if that's you thinking this, the hope is that you've become that way because those early adaptations were necessary for someone's survival. Now the goal is to teach your body that they're no longer necessary. And then as
Mm.
you do that, like the outcomes go far beyond just you experiencing life differently, but your children.
Yeah. Yeah, great and amazing and mind-blowing and like everything together. It's really, really, really wonderful. The power we have is so much bigger than only for
Right.
ourselves. And it reminds me of what the natives say. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but they say the work you do, the healing work you do it for 7 generations back and
Mm.
seven
God.
generations forward. And I just love that. They, it's so beautiful, and they also it's a bit correspondent to the story I shared in the beginning of this interview. They when you're born as a baby, I know this from Native America, Canada. Um, they don't say like the people in the church say, "Oh, this is the first sin." They say, well, some churches do that. Do you know? Do you have that? Yeah, okay, you're familiar with that too. I thought maybe it's only in Europe, but they say, "What's the gift you're coming to bring? What's your medicine? What's the medicine you will bring?" Isn't that beautiful to be met and to be greeted like that? That already solves a lot, doesn't it?
One, it's beautiful. Even something you said very beautifully earlier, Jasper. I just want to highlight it here. You used words like individual when you're talking about right this life force and how beautiful that is, right? To create the space for someone to discover who they are,
Isn't
their
it?
own unique expression, and then as well as to acknowledge that I agree with you. We are all inherently creative. We all have a gift, a purpose, a reason, right, for being that extends beyond just us. I have literal chills,
Yeah, me too. And
lighting me up as I'm saying this.
I truly believe it because I truly believe that this giant, intelligent, creative force, which we don't really know what it is, but it somehow inhabits everything, creates everything. It is such an immense miracle, but we are that. And what I always love when people, and myself, of course, everyone, when we self-sabotage, when we doubt ourselves, when we think what I'm doing here, or when we are too hard on ourselves, I really feel that this giant creative energy wanted to be me. It wanted to be you, any listener, any viewer. And this gives so much power and confidence because this is true. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. And of course, it's covered by all these things. And some of them are so horrible. And I feel like, in what times are we living? It's amazing. What are we doing to each other? I don't know if you see that too, but it's so intense and there's so much trauma. But there's also, of course, the capacity to come back and to undo all these layers. And what you just said with the famine, this man, it's like what we can do for ourselves and opening up for so much around us is so empowering. So thanks a lot for sharing that. And let's dive a little bit more into that, yeah? Because of course, you call it the reparenting. What would you say is reparenting?
Yeah, so reparenting and kind of just again piggybacking off of, I could not agree more. And I think the reason why I wrote this book at this time is a lot of the suffering that we're experiencing, observing that is happening in the world are coming, in my opinion, from these wounds, right? Very few of us in childhood had a secure answer to that question, meaning when I reached for comfort or connection, we were not met with, right? It was there, it was available, it accepted me no matter how I was, no matter what I felt, right? That's not the answer that many of us were given
Pretty
directly or
rare.
indirectly. in childhood. And let's make this even more complicated by the fact that beyond what was happening in our homes, again, influenced by what happened in our parents' homes, like how they were parented in their own childhood, society, and this is a whole rabbit hole that I won't go down, has a lot of unhealthy or at least nervous system challenging, if not traumatizing, beliefs and expectations as well. Because something that confused me, right, when my answer wasn't, oh, I could just be me no matter how I was, my answer, I secured attention and connection in childhood mostly when I was excelling in some way, right? On
Mm,
the surface, who doesn't want to excel, right? You get good grades, you get a good job, you get financial security, you have a good upstanding, place in the community. Isn't that really great? Isn't that what we all want to do? Right? So something as sneaky, my my need to excel to earn praise didn't come from an inner child that just felt good enough as she was. It came from an inner child that learned that she was only worthy of connection in those moments where she was achieving in
yeah.
some way, right? So, and then when we don't feel safe to be ourselves, what happens is we do begin to view other people around us in a very black and white way as good or bad, safe or unsafe. And again, feeling then threatened by certain groups of people, by certain experiences, by relationships in general, when we didn't feel safe to express ourselves in childhood, results in the suffering, the conflict, the wars, in my opinion, that we're seeing, both interpersonal wars and kind of geopolitical wars. But
Hmm.
to get back to reparenting, a lot of us need it, right? Because
Yeah.
we didn't feel safe to just be who we are. Sometimes, again, the way we've adapted is very confusing because on the surface, right, achieving, pushing ourselves and being a caregiver for other people, isn't that good? Isn't that make me a good, upstanding citizen? But if it doesn't come right from a pure place, from the feeling that I'm good enough, even when I'm not showing up to care for another person or to, get an achievement or acquire something, when I don't feel worthy enough as I am, then we could begin the daily journey of reparenting, which, like all of the work, means taking small new actions every day, learning how to show up in connection with ourself, moments where we're joyful, moments that are more difficult, right? Learning how to define the boundaries that we need, learning how to express ourselves, how to be who we are, right? Regardless of the feedback that the world is giving us. And that's a daily practice that we could stay committed to. But also at the same time, going back to an earlier idea, understanding that even a logically healthy journey like reparenting, right, developing boundaries where we didn't have them, not betraying ourselves or abandoning ourselves, and showing up in service of our own wants and needs by expressing ourselves in any given moment. I think we can all agree logically that should feel good, right? When I go and do that. But we have to remember the point that we explored earlier. To our nervous system, very black and white, new choices, even healthy ones, will feel unsafe at first because they're unexpected, they're unpredictable. We don't know how the world responds to us, even when we're acting in a healthy way. So, saying that to say, as we engage, stay committed, right, create new intentions for small new choices of action,
Hmm.
that's the journey of reparenting. We also have to anticipate and be aware that even healthy new choices, right, will elicit some degree of discomfort because our nervous system would prefer the old unhealthy choices that it's been making for a lifetime.
Yeah. Yeah. Even if they damage us and our loved ones.
And our loved ones and, people around us
Yeah,
and
and the whole
it
world, like you
and the
just said.
whole world
Yeah, we
is
don't
right.
care. Just yeah, just bomb. And so let's. How do we start? Because let's say I fall in the same trap every time again. My relationships hurt so much, and I just keep pulling back, and I want something else. I know it. I'm giving an example, but um, how do we start with this reparenting process?
So the first step that is, I believe, the first step of any journey of changing, transformation, relieving suffering is, and we've kind of used this concept a couple times throughout, is awareness, right? And when I say awareness, I'm not just talking about, I think when we immediately hear that word, we think of awareness as like a mental activity, right? I become
Mm-hmm.
aware, like you and I've described many patterns that I've become aware of in myself, right? I'm sitting here in time, I'm calling to mind all of these habits I've had. And right? That's like a more mental function of awareness. The awareness that I'm talking about cultivating that's part of it. But what I'm talking about is developing awareness, not just of what's happening in our mind and all of the kind of activities that our mind can contribute to an experience. Most importantly, in my opinion, is becoming more aware of what's happening in our body. Because we now know, and a lot of my early clinical training was what prioritized the mind. That's what cognitive therapies are born out of. The reality that we have a very powerful mind. A lot of us, right, when we imagine something, if it's, a difficult something or a joyful something, before long, we're having the emotion that we're imagining. That's a quick example. Imagine like, sucking on a lemon right now. Most of us will get that
Yeah,
feeling
yeah,
of
yeah, yeah.
tartness,
Yeah.
right? So common example, mind inducing a feeling in the body. Yes, part of the story. We now understand that just as many messages that are coming from our mind instructing our body throughout the day outside of our awareness, if not more messages, are coming from our body. So that's the awareness that I suggest that is foundationally the kind of ground to build, meaning set moments throughout our day, either predetermined ones where, say, you already have a habit, you drink coffee every morning, brush your teeth, right? That might be a moment where you do what I call an awareness or a conscious check in. For others, we want to set alarms on our phone or post-its or, pick a time of day. And then the practice is really simple. There's two steps. The first step is first notice when it's the time to practice, right? You're having your coffee or your alarm on your phone goes off. When you're alerted, the first step is to just notice in that moment, right? Where was your attention, right? Were you thinking about something? Were you tending to someone in your environment? Like, what were you paying attention to? And then without judging, right, whatever the answer is, now we want to begin, just like the gym, to kind of pump some iron, lift some weights. We want to choose, because we do get to choose where we pay attention to. We want to shift that focus of attention back to our body because chances are the large majority of us, when this check-in time happens, we're not connecting to our body. We're lost in thought. We're worrying about what happened. We're thinking about what could happen. We're not in a body. So while this seems so simple, right, this practice of consciousness or awareness, right, even using different anchors of our body, our breath, our heart rate, and the tension in our muscles, right, those are things we can shift focus to. How am I breathing in this moment? Am I holding my breath? Is it coming really quick and short from my chest? Am I breathing nice and deep from my belly? Right? Another question, how are my muscles? Do I feel tension? Am I just all a ball of tension? Can I notice tension in any particular areas? Or do my muscles feel relaxed, at ease, ready to get up and, move if I need to? Or do I feel so heavy, like I couldn't barely get off the couch even if my house was on fire and I needed to? Those then systems will impact our heart, something that some of us are very aware of. We tune in and our heart's beating out of our chest. For others, it's more faint. But I'm noting those markers because we're always breathing, our heart's always beating, and our muscles always have some degree of tension. Those are also the three areas then that begin to shift and change as our body becomes stressed, as we don't feel safe, as we're reacting to a threat, real or imagined, in our environment, because that's when tension begins to increase, our breathing starts to shift, and then our heart rate reflects that shift by typically increasing in its beats per minute. So that check-in practice builds the foundation of any and all change that can happen, right? Because now not only do I have information, how is my body? Am I feeling safe or unsafe? The more unsafe my body is feeling, the more likely, let's bring this full circle beautifully, I am to elicit those old reactions, say and do the things that I don't mean, show up as the identity or the role that I've learned to play because that's secured comfort and connection, but it doesn't represent who I truly am. But without that awareness, right, without understanding that all of that was inspired by all of this stress that I'm not even aware that my body is experiencing, then I don't even give myself. I shame, right, those moments where I rely on old coping tools. And I don't have the tools to show up differently because we need to learn not only to be in a body, but to create safety in a body that's feeling stress.
Wow, wow, that's beautiful. Yeah, to create safety in a body that's feeling stressed. Wow. Yeah. And it's amazing, how far we've gone away from this body.
So,
It's like we're always only
right.
up here. And of course, the educational system and everything doesn't help to stay
Right.
connected with the body.
And
But
now, if we want to complicate further, not to interrupt you, we have a world where
yeah,
we
let's
live. Not
complicate.
that I love online. We can connect with you. I have a global community, right? We have AI, all these great things that can be tools. Yet, to speak to your point, how many of us, how few, how limited, what limited time we spend in our bodies, right? Because we're living in phones and virtual worlds. And again,
It's like the all of the world, creates this pull outwards, yeah?
right,
How many people help us to guide us back here? Of
correct,
course, there's the nature and there's this
right.
work, but
Hmm.
it's really what you're saying, like everything is pulling you outward. So you almost feel like a lunatic when you start going to the other way, huh?
And you
And
feel uncomfortable, right?
oh
Because
yeah,
what
then
is
you have to
probably
meet
beneath the
also that
surface is
discomfort
yes,
that you've been swiping away all the time.
100%. That's the thing is that we're beautifully wise and savvy. The majority of us that are spending time in our mind is because it's more comfortable up there.
Yeah,
Even if my thoughts are racing and are very uncomfortable, it's probably more tolerable than if I were to drop down and feel the discomfort that's driving those thoughts. That
yeah,
that feels too much. So
yeah.
we've created now a world where I think yes, because very few of us develop tools in childhood of how to cope with discomfort. Now we have very savvily learned to create a life where we don't have to, right? But it
Exactly.
never goes away.
It never goes away. But the question is also, how bad do you want it? How bad do you want to change? Because as long as this comfortable world on the iPhone and on the with the alcohol or anything keeps on soothing you and it's enough, then the need to change is not big enough. Then there only has to be this thing, and you say, okay, I'm going back in the old stuff. So what do you say? Uh, what are these kind of challenges? And what's the point that we need to really make that change?
And I think again, we some of us are inspired into action, right? Because life is imploding, exploding around us, right? Because we
Hmm.
get to the point where we just can't imagine continuing to suffer in this way. Some of us
Exactly.
get urged along that timeline where maybe relationships are beginning to, be impacted by how we are and people are beginning to point out. So a lot of times, right, it's a thing that inspires, or an increase in suffering and intolerability of remaining as things are that
Hmm.
inspires people into action. I think there's different pathways. Oftentimes, though, it's this sense of something has to be done, right? Because it's too uncomfortable. Though, however, it is that we kind of enter the pathway of changing, what has to happen along the way to be able to continue the change and create the actual change and maintain the change that we desire is we have to along the way acquire the ability, the capacity, not just the desire, want to know we should, the capacity in our body to tolerate discomfort, which again
Hmm.
begins with a simple new choice, no matter how what the choice is, the newness of the choice will create a certain level of challenge. But of course, then if you understand, right, the patterning, if connections, relationships, I felt shamed, unsafe, then of course, boundaries, some of the choices that we will make on this journey to be a supportive caregiver of our own self, right, will come with more and more discomfort. We think we're doing it wrong, we're failing, we're taking two steps back in our healing
Yeah.
because, right, the more discomfort, back to that idea of the more stress my body is holding on to or in a given moment, the more likely I am to revert back. So, what I'm saying simply then is there will be a lot of moments where you rely on old habits as you're building capacity because we all have that, like, if you want to think of stress on like a 1 to 10 scale, right? We all have the point of no return, somewhere on an 8 or a 9, where that autopilot is locked and loaded. It's going to say and do the thing no matter how much we don't want it to, right? Because our body is overwhelmed and it's going to revert right back to the thing that it learned it needs to do to keep itself safe in that moment, which is why it's so important to not only have those moments of connecting with our body, getting really kind of connected to this shifts and changes in stress in our body, right? And then, of course, building in like stress helpful lifestyle practices, making sure we're sleeping, eating, moving, resting,
Hmm.
all of the things that help our body cope with stress. Because the more we are aware of natural fluctuations or contextual, circumstantial, relational fluctuations in stress, the more we can make choices that will prevent us getting from that to the point of no return.
Yeah, great, great. And do you feel it's possible for anyone to do the reparenting work?
I think it is, again, I think it's a journey that most of us, if not all of us, need to some extent. We could all use some habits. Again, some of it's just colored by society that is changing over time. We're clear about how unnatural that we're living. And so a lot of us have those patterns passed on from ancestors, right, that
Yeah.
had to adapt in this way that now we have the opportunity to change. So I think any and everyone needs to some extent could benefit from some new habits in adulthood. Anyone can do it. One of the reasons why I created Self Healer Circle is to create a community environment because I'm
Yeah.
very aware that, especially with a community that's global, not everyone has access to, the therapists, the coaches, the kind of support in their geographical locations, or even has the finances to add those in. Though, if we
Hmm.
do have those supportive spaces and practitioners, and we
Yeah.
need support somewhere, right? And I think these
Yeah.
virtual communities can really offer a space of safety that some people might not have access to in their geographical locations.
And can any trauma be healed?
So making sure that we're both speaking, or I can offer a definition of trauma that then will lead into the answer, because trauma as a concept has changed a bit, especially in the past couple decades.
Hmm.
Trauma, I think, kind of a lot of nervous system, kind of aware therapists are defining, myself included, are defining trauma not necessarily as what happened. Historically, we used to put label of trauma on certain events, right, that crossed a certain threshold that often would result in physical threat to our body.
Hmm.
We understand now that trauma is much more wider in scope than just what happened, because trauma happens when we don't have the support to navigate what's happening, right? When someone's not beside us to help support, again, a nervous system that can't calm down on their own through daily stress, through traumatic, unpredictable experiences. So, understanding trauma in that way, I think that captures a larger majority of us, because for a very long time, I would have said I didn't have trauma because I didn't have a moment in time that I could point to and say, oh, that was a threat to me, and this is now what happened. I
Yeah.
understand that I had trauma because I did not have the attunement and the support that I needed. So, very overwhelmingly stressful things that happened, from living in a city to health related issues in my family home
Mm.
without support, continue to then live in me as trauma, because what it resulted in me was overwhelming emotions that my body could not cope with on its own, which is where that habit of, performing, excelling, putting myself last and tending to the world around me or presenting myself in a certain way began. So trauma, again, is a very much more expanded, I think, experience, capturing the larger majority of us. So then, to answer the question of can we heal, I also have to, maybe listeners can get curious, what is the definition of healing, right? Is it
Mm.
going back to a place before, right, trauma happened? Is it never being upset or having a moment, right, where I kind of revert back to old patterns? What I've become aware of, and of course, I still hope I have quite many more decades to live, so maybe this will change in time. Um, I don't think the goal is either of those things. I don't think it's about going back, right, to before life has happened, because we are impacted by life experiences. What allows us to gain wisdom, right, to grow, to change, all part of the human experience. So I don't think the goal, nor can we kind of wave the wand and right go back to before, nor do I think it's possible to never have a moment where we're dysregulated, where we're upset, where those
Mm.
older coping mechanisms or certain experiences might challenge us a bit more based on what had happened, the trauma, right, that we each individually lived. What can change, though, is we can become more and more aware in real time where it's almost like we're having two experiences, right? Where there's the inner child in me that might be really activated, right? When someone gives me a little mild criticism and I'm taking it personally because, right, I hear I'm unworthy in that moment because my book didn't get 5-star reviews from everyone. So that little wounded inner child, right, who just wants to be praised and told I'm great is feeling upset in that moment. At the same time, right, I can have another experience of understanding, awareness, right? I know where that upset has come from. And my goal is to, in more moments than not react from that wounded place, right? Not being debilitated by criticism, but instead, right, making a new choice in those moments. So I think that's what healing really is. It's integrating or allowing our life to become part of who we are. For a lot of us, it's the wisdom that we share. It becomes our passion, our purpose. I don't want to lose, right, the drive that at one time I needed to perform, right, to gain a sense of worthiness. I always want to feel driven and act on my drive and motivation, but I want to do so in times when I can, right? Sorry. I don't want to feel like I have to push myself beyond a limit because that's the only way I can feel worthy. So
Yeah.
that's, I think, the goal. So to simply answer the question is most of us, right, have traumas that we are carrying with us. Our goal isn't to erase them, but it's to allow them to become a part of our experience where they're not driving our future and those habits, but where we can choose when those capacities, those characteristics, those identities, when they make sense and they're aligned and when they don't.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. That's really, 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 really wonderful. I really love that. You also you write about that in this book, the reintegration. I love it because otherwise it's you stay trapped in the feeling that you need to get rid of these things. You need, and you're still not doing well. You're still not healed, and you still need to improve. And what you say is such a relief. You just take it back, and it can be here, and it doesn't define you.
Right.
Yeah, beautiful. So relaxing and loving. Thanks a lot.
Of course. I even love that you use the word relaxing there, Jasper, because it is. It's like, even if something uncomfortable is what we're becoming present to, it's discomfort, it's our suffering, it's a part that was right born from trauma and it still kind of
Yeah.
hurts. We wish it weren't there. There is an easing that happens, a release when we relax into or when we stop, let me put it that way, resisting. It's there, right?
Yeah.
All of these parts, we've gotten very distracted at living virtually, at looking all the different places, not feeling. It's still there.
Yeah.
And there's extensive evidence now, scientific research that kind of talks about the practice, I should say, or like the habit of repressing or suppressing emotions, simply of not letting them out, right? Of hiding them, keeping them tucked in for whatever reason. We now know that not only physically, but a lot of emotional suffering can happen from the experience of emotions that aren't expressed. And that is very real. So that easing that happens, even if we're easing into a very uncomfortable experience, what we're not adding on top of it, that discomfort is there, whether or not we're allowing ourselves to be present to it or not. We're just now taking away the fight. We're taking away the tension, right? We're taking away the effort of trying to keep it down. So it is like an easing. And it
Mm-hmm.
does then release and give us then some actual energy, right? Some
Mm-hmm.
attention. We can now move. We have a little bit of a flexibility now because we're not directing even a physiological energy at that pushing down anymore,
Yeah.
right? If my heart rate is always being elevated, right? Because I'm repressing emotions, I'm stressed, I'm overwhelmed by emotions, then naturally, right, cardiovascular issues might be in our future.
Mm.
Similar with an immune response. Cortisol is a hormone, right? Different hormones, adrenaline, all of these things impact then our body's immune responses. So there's so much now that we're kind of tracing back
Mm-hmm.
to stress and or trauma being a fundamental cause of a million different physical but also emotional diagnoses. We're simply beginning to understand that stress often passed through generations, changing the way that our body is physiologically functioning, though not unchangeable, is playing an absolute role, in my opinion, of the large majority, if not all, most of the illnesses that many of us come down with in
Yeah,
life.
I believe so. Amazing, amazing. Well, you offer a great handbook, a great healing book. It's also full of exercises, besides all the insights and the beautiful stories. I really recommend anyone to buy it. It's full of exercises and so helpful to come back, to come back to this wholeness and yeah, to be in love with the inner child. Um, First, I'm gonna sing a song for you, Dr. Nicole. It's gonna arise in a moment again. Shall I sing a song for the inner child?
I'd be honored. I'd love this. Yes.
I see you, I feel you, I can meet you right here anew. I can see you, I can feel you. Let us heal, let us bring back what we feel is welcomed by our hearts. We can jump right into our hearts, where I meet you, where I greet you as a part of me that wants to be free and welcome, seen and welcome. Come home, my friend, come home again. My hands are open, my hands are here for you to dive right in, and let's create a new story where we all can sing and dance our dance. Let us create a new story where we can be who we are, be who we truly are. Come back home in my heart, my friend. Come home again. It's where we are and always will be, always will be where we are. And that is where I'll meet you anew. That is where I'll see you as new. Let us dance together today, 'cause this day creates a new day, creates a new way for all of us to walk anew, to walk open and free, because we can be with what arises and what surprises us. Yeah, we can dance as the sun, free, and be who we want to become.
So beautiful.
Thanks a
Even that
lot.
concept is another dear friend.
Yeah.
From
Really
the
happy to
burden to the
meet you
friend.
and really thankful that you took this time, Dr. Nicole. I don't take that for granted. You're a huge name and you're doing a lot of great work. So I'm really, really grateful that you took this hour to be with me and with our viewers and to speak about this book. Everybody run to the bookstore or to your online shop and get a few of the copies. Thanks a lot. All the best with your beautiful work. May it expand until infinity. and help the heart of the world heal. Yeah.
Thank you. And I'm honored again to be here. Thank you for continuing to embody your light, share it with me, share it with your community. And thank you all for listening. I truly mean it. I'm so inspired in a world where there is suffering right outside some of your doors and windows. This is so inspirational just to know that so many people are joining together to break cycles, to show up differently. And in my opinion, we're all doing our part to change the world around us. So thank you all for walking this journey alongside of me.
Thank you.